community is seeing its first gun show since the president issued executive action on gun control. President Obama's plan essentially calls for an expansion in background checks for buyers, but part of it is actually designed to address the gun show loophole by clarifying who is or isn't in the business of selling guns. It would also add federal agents to strengthen the background check process, and it would integrate federal mental health records into background checks. So joining us this morning to talk about the different ways that this could affect you, we have two guests with us this morning. Thank you. Gil Smith, of course, you've seen his face before, officer with JSO, 20+ years, and then you are a gun rights attorney. Eric Friday, and obviously we have some different perspectives. Really, everybody has their own perspective. I'll start with Eric. What did you take away from the president's speech?
Well, for the most part, what he's doing is he's changing the law in regards to who is required to have a license to sell firearms. The casual seller doesn't need a license and hasn't needed a license for years, and he's indicating that he's going to require more people who are more casual sellers to have licenses, especially if they regularly engage in selling guns, for example, at weekend gun shows.
So could this also affect somebody who, for instance, if my dad leaves me his gun collection when he dies, if I wanted to sell his guns, would that kind of affect,
Well, there's already an exception in the law that executive orders can't change. There's already an exception in the law for people who are selling off a collection or who inherit a collection or acting as a personal representative of an estate.
Okay. And Gil, to get to you as well, what did you take away from his speech, and how do you think it's going to affect people?
Well, with 30,000 homicides a year in this country, something needed to be done. Of course, this isn't going to solve all the problems with gun deaths, but it only affects people who guns are getting into the wrong hands. Now, the average citizen who is a law-abiding citizen and doesn't have any mental difficulties, it won't have any effect on them at all. So, the changes just aren't there. And I was listening to people talk about how this is going to drastically change things, but when you look at each order, it doesn't change anything for them at all.
One of the things that this touches on is mental health, and that being something that's more looked at into background checks. How do you both stand on that issue?
Well, Florida Carry, the organization I represent, has always taken a very strong position that we want to make sure that guns do not fall in the hands of the mentally ill. In fact, we helped push legislation a few years ago to make it easier to identify those persons. However, one of the very dangerous things in these executive orders are to allow Social Security to report people who let their adult child handle their Social Security checks. Those people are now going to be reported as not fit to handle their day-to-day affairs and are going to lose their gun rights. This is a very dangerous concept. When we start allowing bureaucrats to make decisions on who does and doesn't get to have a firearm, rather than the current process where we have a procedure and a judge has to review it, that's a dangerous thing, and that's what's going to stop people from getting mental health treatment when they need it, and it's going to take away rights from people who should not have their rights taken away.
So we want to hear Gil's answer in just a second. They just told me to go to commercial break, so pause on that thought, get you a good answer going, and we'll be right back with that. You want to stay with us. Gil and Eric are going to continue the discussion. We'll be right back.